The rain clung to the windows like desperate hands, tapping a rhythmic, mocking sound as I stood there, clutching a chipped glass of water, my fingers trembling around it. The dining room was packed, my father at the head of the table, my siblings lined up along the sides, their polished smiles already cracking with the strain of tonight's performance. Birthdays were supposed to be celebrations. Tonight felt like an execution. "Look at her," my father barked, the venom in his voice slicing through the brittle laughter in the room. He didn't even bother to look at me as he raised his glass in a mock toast. The biggest failure in this family. A murmur of laughter followed, some low, some sharp, all cutting. My heart clenched painfully against my ribs. I swallowed hard, feeling the burn of humiliation lodge somewhere deep inside me. "I regret ever raising you," he thundered, slamming his glass on the mahogany table so hard that the chandelier above us quivered. There was no air left in the room. My sisters giggled behind their hands. My older brother shook his head, a look of pity, or was it disgust, etched across his face. Even my mother, sitting rigidly by my father's side, wore that same blank expression she always wore when things got ugly, the kind of practiced detachment that said this isn't my fault. And yet, somehow, I remained standing. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just stood there, feeling the betrayal like knives sinking into my skin, one by one. "Maybe if you had tried harder, you'd be sitting here proudly instead of embarrassing us," my brother added, tipping his wine glass toward me with a lazy sneer. The others laughed again. Even the younger ones who didn't understand the full weight of the words laughed. Because that's what you did in our family. You laughed when someone was bleeding, especially if it was me. I opened my mouth to speak, to say something, to defend myself, maybe, but my throat was tight, my voice trapped beneath years of trying to be good enough. And that's when it happened. A chair scraped against the hardwood floor. It wasn't loud, but in the dead silence that followed my father's latest insult, it might as well have been a gunshot. I turned.
"Grandpa."
Slowly, deliberately, he removed his thick glasses, the same glasses he wore religiously every day, and folded them neatly on the table. Every head turned toward him, the mocking smiles faltering slightly. Grandpa never interrupted. Grandpa never raised his voice. Grandpa just sat quietly, observing.
"Until now."
He pushed himself up with one hand on the table, his old joints creaking slightly, and cleared his throat. "Let me tell you," he said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced the entire room, "what really happened." The air crackled. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. I blinked, frozen. The house I had grown up in, the walls that had heard every slammed door, every whispered insult, suddenly felt like it was leaning in, waiting. "You all think you know everything," Grandpa continued, taking a slow step toward me. "But you don't know the first thing about sacrifice. About love. About her."
He pointed directly at me.
The blood drained from my father's face. "She's not the failure," Grandpa said, his voice growing stronger with every word. "She's the only reason any of you are sitting here, fat and happy." Murmurs stirred around the table. Confused. Defensive. "What are you talking about, Dad?" my father snapped, trying to laugh it off, but his voice cracked just slightly. Grandpa didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and worn at the edges. He tossed it onto the table with a sharp flick of his wrist. "Read it," he said, eyes burning into my father's. No one moved. So Grandpa read it himself, loudly,
Clearly.
every word echoing in the stunned silence. The letter was from years ago, from a time I was too young to remember properly. It detailed how, when my father's business had gone under and we were on the brink of losing the house, it was me, only 14 years old then, who had secretly taken a part-time job, hidden the money in Grandpa's safekeeping, and helped pay the bills behind their backs. It had been my money that kept the lights on, my money that kept food on the table, my money that saved the family from collapsing. I felt dizzy, like the ground had tilted under me. My siblings sat there, wide-eyed and silent. My mother covered her mouth, her hand trembling. And my father, his mouth opened, then closed. then opened again. No words came out. Grandpa stepped closer, his voice a low rumble filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time, pride. She didn't ask for praise, he said. She didn't demand gratitude. She just gave. While all of you took. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. This wasn't a moment for tears. This was a moment of truth. Grandpa placed a firm hand on my shoulder, squeezing it gently. She's not the failure, he repeated. She's the reason you're all still standing. The silence was crushing. No one moved. No one spoke. Outside, the rain finally broke, pounding against the roof with wild, chaotic fury, like the heavens themselves were roaring in approval. And for the first time in my life, I stood taller. Not because someone gave me permission, but because the truth finally did. For a long second, no one moved. My father's hand hovered above his plate, frozen. My mother's face had gone pale, the blood draining from her cheeks. My siblings stared at me like they were seeing a stranger. I didn't move either. I didn't have to. Grandpa's words hung in the air, heavier than anything else in the room. You think money just magically appeared? Grandpa said, his voice quieter now but sharper, like the edge of a blade. While you sat around mocking her, she was fighting for you all, sacrificing without even being asked. The pride in his voice, it broke something inside me. For years, I had lived believing I wasn't enough. Now I realized I had been more than enough all along. My brother shifted in his chair, clearing his throat awkwardly. I didn't know. No, Grandpa said. You didn't care to know. My sister looked at me, guilt flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, but nothing came out. Grandpa turned toward me fully. You don't owe them a single explanation, sweetheart. I bit the inside of my cheek, fighting the emotions clawing at my throat. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt them the way they hurt me. But I wanted something different now. Freedom. I think I'm done, I said, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded. Done begging for a seat at a table where I was never wanted. The words slipped out so naturally, it surprised even me. Grandpa smiled, small but proud. He patted my shoulder once and said, Good. I placed the glass I had been clutching back on the table, gently, calmly, and turned toward the door. Panic broke the silence behind me. Wait, honey, my mother said, standing up. Her voice cracked. Don't leave like this. I paused at the doorway. The girl who would have turned around, desperate for a crumb of affection, was gone. I glanced back over my shoulder and said, not cruelly, not bitterly, just truthfully, you didn't want me before. Remember? Then I walked out. Into the rain. Into the unknown. But also, finally, into myself. The air outside was sharp and fresh, filled with the scent of wet earth and possibility. I didn't know exactly what was waiting for me. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. Grandpa caught up to me under the porch. He held out his old raincoat and chuckled. You're going to need this. Life's messy out there. But it's yours now. I laughed, a real laugh, and slipped the coat over my shoulders. It was too big, smelled faintly of old leather and peppermint, but it felt like armor. We stood there together in the rain for a moment, me and the only person who had ever truly seen me. I'm proud of you, kiddo, Grandpa said. His voice was gruff, but his eyes shone with kindness. Thank you, I whispered.
And I meant it.
Not just for tonight. For everything. As we stepped off the porch into the rain, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The next morning, the sun broke through the heavy rain clouds like a promise. I stood by Grandpa's old pickup truck, watching the steam rise from the wet asphalt. He came out of the house with 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to me. Big day ahead, he said with a wink. I sipped the bitter coffee and smiled faintly. Big day. Because today, I wasn't looking back anymore. I called an old friend, Grandpa said casually, leaning against the truck. He owns that little bookstore downtown. Said he needs a manager. My heart skipped. A bookstore. A fresh start. You don't have to say yes, Grandpa added. But you deserve a place where you're valued. A place that feels like home. I swallowed hard against the lump rising in my throat. For once, someone believed in me without asking me to prove anything first. I want it, I said quickly, before doubt could creep in. I really want it. Grandpa grinned. Then let's not waste time. The bookstore was small but magical. Sunlight streamed through tall, dusty windows. The scent of old pages and wood polish filled the air. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the sharp chaos of the house I had left behind. Mr. Jennings, the owner, was a kind-eyed man in his 70s. He shook my hand warmly. "You come highly recommended," he said, his voice raspy with age. "If Walter believes in you, that's good enough for me." I laughed nervously. "I hope I can live up to it." "You don't have to live up to anything," Mr. Jennings said gently. "Just be yourself." Those words felt like a balm on wounds I didn't realize were still bleeding. For the first time, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I spent the day organizing shelves, chatting with customers, breathing in the peacefulness like medicine. When evening came, Grandpa picked me up, his truck rattling like an old friend. "How was it?" he asked, peeking at me sideways. I smiled, a deep, genuine smile. "It was good. Really good." He chuckled. "Told you. Life's messy, but it's also full of second chances if you're brave enough to take them." As we pulled away from the bookstore, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. Not the failure they called me. Not the burden they sneered at. Someone new. Someone free. It didn't take long for the news to reach them. Small towns had fast mouths. And soon, my family realized I wasn't coming back. At first, it was silent. No calls. No texts. Only the cold absence of people who once claimed to love me. But then the messages started. First, my brother. A simple, awkward text.
"Hey,
"You okay?" Then my mother. "Your room is still there if you need it." And finally, my father. A voicemail so short, it almost sounded rehearsed. "Come home. We need to talk." I sat behind the counter at the bookstore, staring at my phone, heart pounding. The old me would have dropped everything at the first breadcrumb of attention.
but not now."
Not anymore. Grandpa noticed the tension in my hands as I gripped the counter edge. He didn't say anything, just waited, patient and calm. After a long pause, I slipped the phone into my pocket. "They didn't care when I needed them," I said quietly. "They only care now because they lost control." Grandpa nodded, his face thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said, "the people who hurt you the most aren't monsters. They're just broken themselves."
I thought about that.
It didn't excuse what they did, but it made it easier to let go of the bitterness. A week later, they showed up, right outside the bookstore, in the middle of the Saturday rush. My mother stepped through the door first, wearing a stiff smile. Behind her, my father and siblings trailed like awkward shadows. I froze behind the counter. Customers glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Sweetheart," my mother said, voice sticky sweet. "We were just passing by and thought we'd say hello." Passing by? The lie was so thin it barely held together. I looked at them, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see giants towering over me. I saw small, scared people. People who didn't know how to say we were wrong. My father cleared his throat. "You doing good here?" he asked stiffly, like the words burned his tongue. I nodded once. "Very good, actually." He looked down at the floor, ashamed.
"Good."
Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because maybe shame would teach him what cruelty never could. My brother shuffled forward. We miss you." His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw real regret in his eyes.
I didn't know what to say.
Part of me wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to cry. Instead, I smiled.
Small, soft, genuine.
"I'm happy now," I said. "And I hope you find your happiness too." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning.
And that was enough.
My family stood there, unsure, awkward, waiting for more. Apologies.
Tears.
Reunions. But I didn't give them that. I gave them peace. and kept the rest for myself. They left quietly, and as the door swung shut behind them, a weight lifted from my chest. Grandpa stepped up beside me, grinning. "Well done, kiddo." I let out a shaky breath and laughed. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was something far better. Freedom. The bookstore became more than just a job. It became home. A quiet haven where I could finally hear my own thoughts, and like what they were saying. Every morning, I unlocked the door, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. The regular customers learned my name. Little kids rushed in after school, dragging sticky fingers across the shelves. Elderly couples wandered in, holding hands, looking for old novels and new memories. And I, the so-called biggest failure, was exactly where I was meant to be. One afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled through the windows, Grandpa walked in holding a brown paper bag. He set it on the counter with a playful grin. "What's this?" I asked, wiping my hands on a cloth. "Open it," he said. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden plaque. Simple. Beautiful. It read, "Hope's Corner, managed with heart." My throat tightened. I traced the letters with my fingers, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. "You're not just surviving anymore," Grandpa said. "You're building." I didn't have words big enough to thank him, so I just stepped around the counter and hugged him tight. For a long moment, he held me like he had when I was a little girl, scared of the storms. And just like back then, he made me believe everything would be all right. Later that week, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, my father's familiar scrawl.
Clumsy.
Uneven. I was wrong. We were all wrong. You didn't fail us. We failed you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, I am proud of you. I sat back, stunned. Not because it changed everything, but because it meant he was trying. In his own flawed, broken way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something toward him that wasn't anger. Not trust, not yet. But maybe a small, flickering hope. Seasons changed. Leaves turned gold, then brittle brown. Snow blanketed the little town. And through it all I stayed.
Grew. Laughed. Loved.
I started volunteering at the library on weekends, tutoring kids who struggled to read. I hosted cozy book club nights at the store, where strangers became friends. I planted flowers outside the shop in spring, their colors shouting against the gray sidewalks. I built a life, not the one my family planned for me, but one I chose with both hands open wide. One evening, standing at the front window, I watched the town square light up with holiday decorations. Grandpa sat behind me, reading an old Western novel, a cup of cocoa in his hand. And I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval. Not for love. Not for anyone's permission to be happy. I had given all those things to myself.
Piece by piece.
Brick by brick. And I had built something unshakable. Something real. My reflection in the window smiled back at me. Not broken. Not bitter. Stronger.
Softer.
Wiser. I turned to Grandpa and said, "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." He chuckled, setting down his book. "Kiddo, you didn't need me to believe in you. You just needed to believe in yourself." I laughed, wiping a tear from my cheek. Because he was right. And as the first snowflake drifted past the window, melting softly against the glass, I whispered to myself, I made it. Not in spite of them. Not because of them. But because I finally chose myself. And that was more than enough.